A pencil skirt is that skirt that is a little bit tapered at the hemline. You are most welcome, my dear. So to start off, I'm labeling my front piece as F and it is folded into two. So I'm working with the width measurement of about 12 inches, seam allowances included. Having divided my hip measurement that I'm working with of 40 inches by 4, getting 10 plus the 2 inches as the seam allowances. So the length that I'm working with is about altogether is about 22 inches. But starting off, I have to put in mind that I have the waistband to add onto this skirt. So I'm starting off by marking half an inch line from the top, and I'll use that as my waistline. So I'll be putting my tape measure as that, putting in mind that those 2 inches I've put off are for the waistband. So this will be my waistline, and that half an inch that I've left will be for the joining allowance. So I am also marking my hip line at around 8 inches, putting in mind that I'm taking off 2 inches for the waistband. So I think you're seeing the way I'm placing my tape measure. So going back to the waistline, I have to input my waist measurement, the one that I'm working with. So it is about 9.5 inches. Having divided the waist measurement divided by 4, and I also added 2 inches, 1 inch for seam allowance and the other 1 inch is for that. Now getting to the hip measurement, I also divided the hip measurement by 4 plus 1 inch seam allowance. So at the hip measurement I won't be adding that because my dart won't go up to the hip measurement. So at the hemline, whatever I have at the hip line is what I have to put at the hemline. But since this is a pencil skirt, I'll just deduct 2 inches from whatever measurement I have at the hip line. So at the hip line I have 11 inches and the hemline I'm marking 9 inches since this is a pencil skirt. But between 1.5 to 2 inches is always nice, but I've decided to work with 2 inches. So after marking that at the hemline, I just connect my points. So please make use of your hip curve, your rollers, or by freehand if you are used just like me. And having used that rule, I have to go in at the hip line and correct that curve correctly, and that is where I'll be cutting. So but before cutting, when it comes to a skirt, that waistline is always a little bit curved, so I have to consider that, and before considering that I have to mark where I will be putting my dart. So my dart will be at around 4.5 inches from the center front, and I have to notch that. I get that from the nipple to nipple measurement of the person that I'm making the skirt for, which is 8 inches divided by 2. I get 4, so that 4 inches I add half an inch as sewing allowance, and that is where I place my dart, measuring from the center front. So now I have to, at the center front, I went down by half an inch and I connected that half an inch to the sides, just as I'm doing here. Remember, I've told you the waistline is always curved at the front, but at the back it just remains straight. But when it comes to the front, we curve it at the center front, and the sides just remain the same. So I have to make sure that my dart placement is seen, and after all that I just cut out my marked piece. So this is the front piece that we have. So now to cut out my back piece, I have two pieces that I've splitted into two, and I'm placing my front piece onto these two pieces that I have, and I'm marking out 3/4 of an inch, and that is where I'll be placing my zipper. So this 3/4 of an inch are for my zipper allowance. So wherever that zipper allowance ends, it's where I'm placing my front piece. That is where my front piece starts from, and after that I just cut out my back piece. So the back piece is, wider than the front piece by 3/4 of an inch, and those 3/4 of an inch are for the zipper allowance. So this is what I have now: two pieces of the back and one piece for the front. So I have to also determine where I'll be placing my dart at the back piece, and I notch that place just like that. So for the back dart, I'll use 5.5 inches as the length, and the front I'll use 4.5 inches, since the half inch will be for the joining allowance. So I have to cut off the other half an inch that we carved at the waistline of the front. Remember, the back waistline just remains straight, but we carve the front waistline. I also ended up cutting out my waistband. It is 5 inches in width, half an inch for joining allowance, and I will be having 2 inches for the waistband on fold just like that, and I will be placing it at the waistline just like that. So guys, after cutting all the pieces, I have to show you how we will be sewing. So I'll get my 2 pieces of the back piece, and I'll take in my darts just like that. I will be using 5.5 inches for the length of the darts for the back, and that half an inch is the joining allowance at the waistline. So that is 5 inches for the back and 4 inches for the front, but I will be measuring 4.5 inches, since the half inch will go into the waistband as joining allowance. So after taking in the darts, I'll place everything, aligning right sides facing each other, and I'll join the sides for my skirt. After joining the sides, I'll go to the center back behind, or even before that I can just attach my waistband, and after attaching the waistband, I'll measure out at the center back. I'll measure out where my zipper will stop, and then sew going down, and before finishing up to the downsides, I'll leave some space for my slit, since I'm using non-stretch fabric. But if you're using a stretchy fabric, you can leave out the slit if you want, but if still you want it, you can put it there. So this is it at the sewing machine. My darts are taken in. This is for the front. No, this is for the back, guys. I'm sorry. This is the back dart. This is the right side, and the other one down is the front piece. So after the darts, I have to join these sides, and this is what I'm doing at the sewing machine, joining the sides by half an inch seam allowance that I left, and after one side I joined the other side, and I finished, and I ended up with my desired shape. So that is the skirt after joining the sides. It is starting to form out. So after the sides, I came and measured where my zipper will stop, and using that zipper allowance, I just joined my center back for the two pieces of the back piece of the skirt. And before reaching the hem, I also had to measure out about 7 inches from the bottom or from the hemline, and that will be for my slit. So I finished up my sewing, and that is where my slit will be, and on top here is where I'll put my zipper. So guys, after all that, I have to fold in my waistband into two. Remember, it is 5 inches, and on fold it is 2.5 inches. Half an inch is for the joining allowance to the waistline. So now I'll just join my waistband to the skirt from the center back, or where the zipper will sit, throughout to the other side still of the center back. So this is what I am doing now, and this skirt is not all that difficult. You can make it in about 30 minutes. So this is the zipper, guys, that I'll be joining at the center back. And after joining the zipper, I'll finish up my slit and I'll hem my skirt, and that will be all. So after hemming, this is what I have as the finished skirt, pencil skirt. It is tapered at the waist, at the hemline, guys. The slit is intact, zipper intact, waistband intact, and that is the back. Then for the front, this is how it looks like. So a pencil skirt can really be looking nice when it is longer in length. So that is it, guys. I love you so much. See you.